Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the webinar. We're so excited to have Data Masons with us today. Just a quick couple pieces of housekeeping, and then we will jump right in. First, if you have any questions, feel free to type them into that question box. I will get them called out and answered for you. Second, like all of our webinars, we are recording this one. So if you want to watch it again later, if you want to show it to anybody within your organization, we will have the recording up by this afternoon on our website, which is innovia.com. So without further ado, Brian, I will hand it over to you.
Okay, great. Again, thank you for the opportunity here today. Thank you for all of the folks out there listening over the online presentation. What we're going to be covering today is the 10 EDI best practices, integrating your supply chain with Dynamics NAV. Just as a brief background, Data Masons is a certified solution for the Microsoft Dynamics community, long track record with Microsoft NAV, actually going back to the Navision days. Myself, I've been involved with EDI now over 17 years. Throughout the time, as many of you have probably seen, EDI has really changed, going back to remember the days when Walmart had, a 9600 baud, Clio modem. So we'll talk through just some best practices and things to consider, whether you're doing EDI today or exploring that possibility, the ways that Innovia and Data Masons can hopefully assist with you. So as far as the agenda, again, we're going to cover some of the best practices. I've prepared a short demonstration to at least give you an overview of some of the concepts that we're going to be covering today. Obviously, we'd like to do more one-on-one personal demonstrations, so if something is of interest, that definitely can be arranged. And lastly, we'll open up to any questions that the audience may have, and I'll do my best to get those answered for everyone. So, I love this picture. Don't customize the ERP. We've all kind of been there throughout the years where, our unique business processes, our requirements by some of our trading partners, such as customers, and there's that, feeling that, boy, we have to modify NAV in order to accommodate. Unfortunately, this can be very costly, both in the initial implementation, more importantly, just the ongoing maintenance, both in the sense of, what you've done to initially modify, but then at some point as you start to upgrade or as processes change. And so we are always mindful of, from an EDI viewpoint, is there that opportunity to eliminate modifications? And so classic examples might be that a business partner has asked you to collect a piece of data, a line item sequence number, for instance. It really doesn't add value to your NAV operation. However, you are mandated to send that back on an outbound document such as an ASN or invoice. And so having a EDI system that can capture those details and use it on the way back out, again, helps you to eliminate, NAV modifications. This also is very helpful in the notion of not disrupting your business, because a lot of times if a customer, has you track this information, if they make a change, you may only have 30 to 60 days of compliance in order to make that happen. And so if you're not able to configure compliance and instead have to rely on coding, again, this can be a challenge and disruptive in the overall model. So again, our recommendation is don't customize the ERP unless you really have to. Printing money, boy, when it comes to EDI, transaction fees and chargebacks, really come to mind. Again, seeing over the years the various ways that EDI communications have evolved. It used to be when I first started off that everyone required you to use, again, a value-added network, or VAN, as they're often called. That implied a per document fee for every transaction through the network. And I referenced that, Walmart Clio modem back in the day. The world has started to change, really, Walmart driving a lot of it, to being able to communicate directly. And the value of trading directly with your partners and eliminating third parties is it eliminates the transaction fees. For instance, I had a customer that I helped late last year who had started off shipping to stores and distribution centers, and all of a sudden, started to take on .com dropship orders. And they were spending, after that program with their old provider, over $100,000 in transaction fees alone. And it really took out from the bottom line. And so that ability to eliminate transaction fees was very important for them. It actually helped improve the relationship because they had more visibility to the transactions. The other thing that you want to really take into account is the notion of chargebacks. And so, for instance, I was just helping an organization last week who was starting to trade with Kroger's. And so what Kroger's had basically said is if you're not doing EDI, i.e. electronically trading with them, every transaction was a $200, cost recovery fee, because it costs Kroger's, more time, more labor to basically, work with that organization as a supplier. And so as they were continually increasing their volume and looking at other business partners, an integrated EDI program, financially made sense, but it also strategically made sense. These were a large national account that they wanted to make sure that not only were they in compliance, but again, being able to exceed some of the expectations. So again, point 2, minimize, if not eliminate, transaction fees associated with EDI. Choose Scalable. We've all been there. We have the cute puppy. We got the home there, and it starts to grow. And I like this little picture here with the poor fellow with this small little bed. Unfortunately, it started out, being comfortable and was meeting all the needs. But, as things change, obviously, that no longer was the case. And so as you would relate that to EDI, again, is this a system that supports multiple servers, supports high availability, has the throughput for the transactions that you may be starting with? A lot of times in an EDI relationship, you may start off on a regional basis with limited SKUs, and all of a sudden you start to expand where you're shipping to, you're expanding what you're shipping. Again, maybe, instead of that real big order to the distribution center, now you're going out to individual stores. We all hear, omni-channel and e-commerce, so now we've got an opportunity to extend our product lines, out. But again, now we're starting to deal with these smaller orders, but with much larger transactional volume. And so having a system that's scalable, that can handle the volume, becomes very critical to make sure that you have room to grow and meet compliance, with these key business partners. So support multiple standards. I always kind of joke that they named EDI wrong. They should have called it EDID. Everyone does it differently. And I say that because the notion of EDI, electronic data interchange, really can mean a lot of different things to different people. And so as you explore a partnership and what's right for your business, you oftentimes need to make sure that that solution can support multiple standards. And so here, for instance, within North America, when people say the words EDI, they're often actually referring to a very specific standard, such as X12, where you may hear things like 850 purchase order, 810 invoice, 856 ASN. But then there's kind of substandards around UCS, which tends to go around food and beverage. You have VIX, which is often in apparel. You may have EDIFACT, which is more of a global standard. All of these are the notion of EDI, or electronic trading, but again, there's different standards. To complicate it further, each of those standards have versions, and those versions can change. The actual standards themselves have a lot of optional rules, and the reality is how Walmart is trading with Costco, who's different than, Cardinal Health. Each of those national accounts using the standards have unique relationships. In our demonstration, sometimes we'll talk about the fact that Walmart's EDI specification takes 120 pages to describe how to simply trade an order. Multiply that out by the number of documents, by the number of business partners, and so again, having that appreciation of the standards becomes very important. The other thing I'd bring to your attention is, again, the notion of electronic trading is not, solely, related to EDI standards. We see a lot of customers who's doing XML. For instance, we see third-party logistics providers. Oftentimes, their preference is around an XML standard because it just gives a little bit more flexibility in regards to their relationship with you. Flat files, things like positional or delimited files, CSV would be a very common example. And so having a system that can handle all these standards, deal with the automation, the business rule validation becomes very critical for your ability to, again, look at best practices, in regards to electronic trading. Pick a solution, not a tool. I look at all these things that are on there and how often, there's oftentimes where, boy, we do have multiple things that maybe could solve the problem, but what's right at that moment and what's going to happen as we go over time. And so we talked a little bit about customizations. This is often, very critical as we get into a solution versus a tool. Do I have to go in and take on a large technical burden in order to do mapping compliance, to integrate into and out of NAV? Sometimes we're maybe outsourcing this work, and in the wrong model, this can become very expensive. More importantly, it may be a timely issue. Over my years, I've definitely seen situations where, hey, we've got that local guy. Unfortunately, they're retired or they're taking on other work. And what should be, a matter of hours, if not days, unfortunately turns into weeks and months because, again, wasn't the right partnership, the right tool for that ongoing relationship. And so we always like to bring that, to people's attention as you explore. Again, a lot of times you may start off where this one customer is asking for EDI, maybe a limited number of documents, but once you get that first partner, a lot of times you're going to continue to grow. And so you just want to think of those ongoing costs, and again, that notion of solution versus a tool. Select an expert. Boy, this little guy here is trying his hardest, to try to help here, but, unfortunately, just probably not qualified for this particular task. And so, we see this a lot. Sometimes it might be people that definitely have EDI expertise, but unfortunately do not understand NAV and, some of the variability in regards to the other ISV solutions that are out there, how the different versions of NAV come into play, and just some of the different configuration options. And so, for us, we really focus on dynamics. And so it's not enough to have EDI expertise. We really want to have a deep domain expertise in regards to NAV, in regards to how are we integrating with, customers and third-party warehouses, suppliers, carriers, etc. Because at the end of the day, EDI automates what I can do within the NAV environment. And so these two really go hand in hand. The other thing for us as well is, again, because we're not trying to be all things to all people, by focusing on dynamics and focusing on NAV, we can have those experts on staff. And so again, putting in context EDI, how do those two marry up? And so, selecting an expert to partner with, is probably one of the more critical things that I would say as far as your partnership. I've definitely seen situations where, boy, this person handles EDI and another organization handles the integration, and now all of a sudden, you've got a disconnected model with many different parts. Versus a solution and an expertise where, EDI and NAV integration can be one of the same. So eliminate unpredictable costs. How many times has something come up to bite us and we just didn't expect it? And so, with EDI, oftentimes, these chargebacks and situations can really rear themselves pretty quickly. We've definitely helped organizations that unfortunately, again, may have a $20,000 chargeback, here and there. And at the end of the year, again, this can very easily add up to 6 figures or more. And so you really want to be mindful of, some of the costs in considerations. And so, for instance, as I talked about, the EDI standards allow for different versions. The trading partners over time will implement those changes and unique things within their own environments. And so those changes can occur, and if you have a large number of partners. You also get into the notion of, compliance responsibility. Is it your responsibility to make those changes? Is it your outsourced EDI provider? If so, what's the timing of those areas? All of this becomes very critical, especially if it's unclear on support. Again, that notion of multiple parties. And so typically EDI is one of those mission critical elements. Hey, invoices are not going out, shipment notifications are incorrect. You need immediate assistance. And so being able to pick up the phone, remote session in, whatever the situation calls for, to come to resolution very quickly, again, becomes very critical, in the elimination of, helping on these unpredictable costs. Get optimized integration. Oftentimes, we'll see where, boy, the relationship starts off with an inbound customer purchase order and I need to send them an outbound invoice. But in today's EDI environment, it's very common that you may have, 10, 15 documents or more that a given business partner is asking you to communicate. So purchase order acknowledgments, advanced shipping notices, PO changes, payment remittance advices, daily inventory levels, forecast information, point of sale information. These are just a few of the transactions. And so in today's, notion of, 24/7 commerce, everything's on the web, the stores may be opened up more. And so it's very important to get this optimized in regards to your supply chain. Here at Data Masons, we actually support over 65 different integration points, supporting, again, that notion of customers, suppliers, third-party warehouses, carriers, brokers, government agencies, just to name a few. If you think of, in essence, an electronic document that you're trading outside of your 4 walls, oftentimes an EDI program can help you optimize those integrations. You do that typically in the notion of reducing, manual labor, time that's being spent, and in any sort of volume. The other thing that can come out of that is, unfortunately, we as people make mistakes. You transpose a number, and accidentally you've overshipped or undershipped. You've got an unhappy customer. They now want to have stuff returned back. You've got to expedite, goods to correct the issue. And so that one mistake, can be very, very costly. And so having optimized integration that's going to, eliminate the people having to, quote unquote, click the buttons to make it happen, and more move to, hey, we brought in 1,000 orders, number 37 had an exception, let's have our people focus on that exception. We can have them work on more strategic stuff, let the system, let NAV, do what it was designed to do, which again was helping you to optimize your business. So choose a flexible model. Again, I've referenced a few times here this morning, again, that notion of how you maybe start off the relationship to maybe how you grow. And so again, if you start off with only a few partners, a few documents, it might make all of the sense to outsource that. As you continue to grow and now all of a sudden you've got 50 partners, 100 partners, 90% of your revenue is coming through EDI, that may be an area where you may have made the decision that, you want to have that controlled in-house. And so whether it's the notion of fully managed, meaning that, someone else is handling the mapping compliance, even to the extent of actually running the software for you day to day, which we call our managed services, to the other end where you're using, our mapping tool and building out, your own maps and dealing with the compliance. And really anywhere in between where you're doing some, someone else is doing some, having that flexibility becomes very, very critical. And this somewhat also goes back to the notion of transaction fees. Again, it seems like almost weekly, I see a new announcement where someone who previously required a value-added network all of a sudden now supports direct communication. And so, in a hosted EDI environment, for instance, oftentimes, you're locked in to using their method of communication, which ultimately is a per transaction fee. And so here at Data Masons, we're very big believers in flexibility. And so again, with us, if that customer allows you to trade direct, you have the option to go ahead and move there. So my 10th point that I want to make is really around this notion of automation. And so typically when you're making an investment in integrated EDI, it's often because, again, a key customer or key business partners ask you to trade. You have a decent amount of volume where, having the system automatically process the orders makes sense. And so when you do this, it's got to be automated in a way that helps you manage by exception. And I'm going to demonstrate this as we get into the solution, but, again, is the price correct? They ordered in eaches, but I want to ship in cases. I've got a minimum order amount. Were the terms correct? If you think about what your customer service people are doing when they physically key in an order, now we need to move that to a more systematic way of processing. And so again, if we had 1,000 orders come in, bring to my group's attention those that had the exceptions of things that we can configure. Here with our Vantage Point solution, that's really part of the key to, some of the success that we've seen our customers, have is, again, that ability to automate these key processes. And at the end of the day, instead of focusing on the technology and the compliance element, it allows you to focus in on your business. And that becomes very, very critical. So with that, we're going to do a small demonstration and really just to kind of give you a flavor for what EDI can help you to do. And again, whether you're brand new to EDI, or maybe do an EDI in a different way. Hopefully this will give you some good ideas. So the reality of, a Vantage Point customer is they're probably not actually in the solution itself. They've got NAV running. They have various customers that are sending them EDI, and so maybe I had Target and Amazon and all these various customers. They're sending in our orders. Well, we're going to see evidence of that because orders have started to show up within, sales orders here. Now that would obviously make for a very boring EDI demonstration. And so what I'd like to do is kind of take you under the covers a little bit. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and sign into Vantage Point. Now Vantage Point, this is the client. This is a full multi-user system. You have unlimited users. Under the utilities, I can synchronize with Active Directory. So boy, Brian Lynch can process orders, but he's not authorized to actually set up the system or modify trading partners. So a lot of times when we first deploy, we're going to tell Vantage Point where your NAV server is located, whether that's an on-premise deployment, whether that's a cloud deployment. Vantage Point supports both. And so once we know where your server is located, basically what we're going to do is set up which of the companies are now EDI enabled. And what that's going to do is give us visibility to the various business partners that I'm trading with. Now, in my example, I have 100 or so set up. I typically use Target as kind of my demonstration. And so as I'm kind of going through here, what's basically happening is I can tell, for Target, basically the various settings that we have, for our business partner. And so what I'm going to do is under that relationship, excuse me here, it looks like I've timed out, so let me just close out here real quick, is I can actually go into Vantage Point and say for that particular business partner, what documents are they actually trading? And so under the target relationship, I might have things like my orders, my advanced ship notices, and other details that I need to set up. And so let's go ahead and go into Target. And so for that, again, I have the documents. I have under those documents, basically, the maps that I would use. I have the methods of communication, because again, in our world, Target might be communicating direct, but boy, Kroger's is using a value-added network. Well, within Vantage Point, we can set up all of those various situations. Now, once I've identified that, in this case, Target was an EDI-capable business partner, it's often the case where, their address codes are different than my locations. Their part numbers are different than my part numbers. Well, this is information that you're typically tracking within NAV, and so Vantage Point is listening for and watching the NAV system, so for inventory and items, and we can actually synchronize that information so now that EDI has it from a day-to-day standpoint. But if I were now set up, and need to process, again, this notion of incoming customer orders, I could, quote unquote, click the button whereby we're going to connect to the network, get our purchase order, send our PO acknowledgement, etc. And so off to the left here, in a manual environment, we've put in kind of these overview workflows of some of the key business documents. But the reality is, again, I talked about that 65 plus documents here where we're integrating into NAV, or the notion of information that we're pulling out of NAV. And so we use XML ports to push information and transactions into NAV, and we use SQL views to read those transactions out. That gives us a lot of flexibility in regards to how we actually process our transactions. So instead of actually, quote unquote, clicking the button, what we're going to do is we're going to show you what we call our workflow scheduler. And workflow scheduler is basically sitting at a server level automating all of these steps. And so as an administrator, I do not need to have this client open, but as an administrator, I can go through and actually say, okay, go ahead and process my orders now. But again, the reality is I've told the system, I want to go import POs on a frequency, in this case, once upon startup, so I've already pushed an order into NAV. But in a production environment, that may be every 5 minutes, once an hour. Hey, Target, I do this. Amazon, I do that. You have the configurability to allow the system, to be flexible to what you're needing. The same goes true with what it is that we're actually doing. Here, the task list, we're connecting to the network, i.e. click the button. We're sending the PO to NAV, i.e. click the button. However, in an automated environment, I need to have audit reports and my exception logs. It's not enough to simply send these orders over to NAV and hope they get there. EDI with VantagePoint is actually monitoring that situation to say, hey, I had 1,000 orders go in this morning, number 37 had a problem, we emailed the customer service representative, but did that order actually make it in? Well, with reporting and audits, we can control this. But at this point, we've configured our task. FYI, we ship with over 100 of these pre-configured. You can build your own. By the way, they don't always have to be EDI related. I have customers who, for instance, send reports out with our system. But armed with what we are automating, what the system has actually done is we've actually brought in an order, from our customer. And so this first entry here, which was brought in just a few minutes ago. Now, the reality is, our business partner sent us EDI. And if you've never seen raw EDI, here's an example of X12. And so hopefully you'll never have to read this, but there's the beginning segment. I've got service allowance charges, I've got my ship to, I've got my line item. EDI is meant to be computer to computer, but sometimes our customer sends us bad data, or there may be reasons where I need to hold it and manipulate it. And that's actually where VantagePoint shines. And so every transaction has this notion of ready, hold, or complete. And so again, with the automation and some of the other configuration, we can tell the system how to actually process. But if we take that same information, one of the first things that we do with it is we transform it into XML. And so here, now that same information starts to have more meaning. And so whether it's our customer staff or your support team, we now know, boy, what's that BEGO2? Oh, that's a purchase order type code. Well, they sent over a value of SA. Well, what's that mean? Well, that's a standalone order. But even with this may not necessarily be what I would call customer service friendly. So I could view a human readable report, one way to look at this transaction. But the other way is, if this is a customer order that maybe, had an issue attached to it, if we need to correct it, I probably want to look at it in more of a form view. And so here I have that classic, header, ship to information, etc., with the various line item details. And so again, we're empowering customer service to, if you've given them security, to be a part of the overall EDI experience. And again, this goes into that notion of helping you reduce costs, giving you more flexibility. So that way IT does not always have to be involved. Now, when we set up our system, one of the things I always like to call out is the notion of exceptions, because everyone's a little bit different. And so here we actually can configure, what exceptions that we're looking for, the notion of, if I find something, what am I saying? And I always like to point out, you can really personalize this. So step 1, do this. Step 2, do that. Well, this is the information that's going to show up when we press our F1 help or when we get that email exception. And so you can be very directive as to what needs to occur and make this personal to your environment. How many times has our main user went on vacation or got promoted? Here, we can allow the system to self-document basically what has taken place. But I now take you back to how I started my demonstration. The reality is I'm typically not in Vantage Point. All of those things occurred automatically. And so here, if I go through and actually refresh the server, which, sorry, my nav has timed out as well. So let's go open up nav here. We're going to actually look at the order that we've actually created in the system here. And so if I look at basically my open orders, we should hopefully now have a new order that we want to look at. And right there is the transaction that EDI automated. And so again, that same information, but now we've normalized it to our customer account number, our part numbers, our unit of measures, other details that we may have wanted to track. If I've modified NAV to track additional details, again, Vantage Point can connect to that information basically via the XML schema. So again, it becomes more of a configuration to track those details. Now, in this case, if I was following along the overall order to cash cycle, depending on your pick, pack, ship process, I might send this order out to a third-party warehouse. Again, EDI could be used to do that. You maybe are drop shipping to a vendor, and so a purchase order is now being generated to your vendor. Or maybe you're doing your own fulfillment. Here, for instance, I might do a simple, post where I'm doing the shipment and invoice. Now, I'm running NAV within a laptop environment, so this would take a little bit to physically do, but I did want to at least kind of talk about what's happening on the back end. And so depending on your shipping, for instance, ASN details may be coming from NAV. It may be coming from a third-party WMS or shipping system. So for instance, we've integrated with eShip and a number of other systems that are on the market. More importantly, if you're not collecting those details today, we have the ability within our pack ASN to actually give you a pack out environment. This can use a simple wedge scanner to collect the details of what item went into what box. It can go through and calculate box level details. For instance, we know Target ordering this item, we pack 6 to a box, go calculate how many boxes and pallets that I need. Vantage Point can produce paperwork such as a VIX compliant bill of lading, UCC 128 labels, or now referred to as GS1 128 labels. Those are 4x6 labels that typically go on the box or the pallet, whatever the container is. That helps our business partner scan that unique label and associate it with the ASN so that they can automate their receiving process. At some point, we're going to pull out our outbound invoices. And again, I can click the buttons to do that. Or again, most of the time, we see that in a fully automated environment. All of this is supported by key performance indicators, as well as, again, various exception reports that help us to manage. Some classic examples, I sent out an invoice or an ASN, and I told Vantage Point I should have an acknowledgement within a specified time period. If I don't get that, that implies my customer never got the document and there's an issue. So that's an exception and an audit that I want to take action upon. Well, Vantage Point, has that pre-configured. Same thing as I get into maybe advanced ship notices. I know that I need to have my ASN sent to my partner within so many hours of the truck physically showing up. So again, an audit that I may want to control. So hopefully this gives you a quick overview flavor of the Vantage Point solution. What I'm going to do with our remaining time is go ahead and open it up to any questions that we may have from the audience or as a part of the chat.
Thanks, Brian. We do have a couple of questions. The first one is, do you support cloud deployments?
Yes, we do. We see a lot, and especially with Microsoft, cloud first. So Azure and different environments that are out there. We're certified for a number of data centers. And again, one of the flexibilities of our solution is that we can work in both a cloud deployment or again, a classic, on-premise deployment with NAV. So
Okay,
great question.
Great. Our next question, do you offer subscription pricing?
We do, and it's interesting, kind of with the cloud, cloud really can mean a lot of different things to different people. And so, is it a matter of how you're deploying the software, or is it an issue of how you're paying for the solution? And so here at Data Masons, again, very flexible. And so we have the classic license, where you kind of acquire up front. We also have the ability to turn that into more of a monthly subscription option for you. So we can work with the Innovia team to see what works best for your situation.
Okay, great. Our next question, does your company offer international support hours?
We do, and definitely what we're seeing, especially within the NAV community and Microsoft in general, Microsoft is just involved in more deployments. And so we've seen customers through mergers and acquisitions or just other things that they may be doing from a global expansion. And so again, EDI tends to be one of those mission critical applications. And so for us, being able to offer 24 support becomes very critical. So yes, we definitely have those resources ready and more than happy to help companies that need those hours.
Okay, and our final question here this morning, Brian. My partner wants me to trade directly via AS2 versus using a VAN. Can you support this?
We can, and so that goes into the notion that we talked about around direct. And so AS2 is a very specific form of using the internet to trade directly. It's dealing with encryption as well as digital certificates. So you're verifying that each party is who it says it is. Classic examples, Walmart, Amazon, Bed Bath & Beyond. You can almost pick any industry, and AS2 is a very common protocol. We fully support that, and again, have the ability to use a VAN should that be warranted, for various situations. So again, we support those methods among others.
Okay, great. Well, Brian, that is all of our questions. So we just want to thank you so much for your presentation this morning. And of course, we want to remind everybody we're recording it. So our recording will be up on the Innovia.com website by this afternoon.
Well, great. Thank you, everyone, for joining. And again, thank you for the time here today.